School of Astrology on retrograde. Now that Mercury is in retrograde, it's a good time to speak about the retrograde motion of planets. So firstly, in astronomy, what does retrograde mean? It means the apparent retrograde motion of a planet, and it just appears that a planet would move backward as seen from the Earth, but of course no planet ever moves backward. So how does this go? If the Earth passes by a planet on its path around the Sun, the other planet may appear to move backwards because the Earth would, like on the inside, overtake the other planet. And the other way around, of course. This is basically just how the other planet appears to move backward, not just because it really turns around, of course. The regular motion, by the way, is called prograde. So we have retrograde and prograde. We put here for you also the link to the Wikipedia, where there is a much more elaborate description that you can look up should this interest you in more detail. So now what does retrograde mean in astrology, like for the interpretation that we are doing? So the properties are typically slowed down in comparison to the natural properties of a planet. People with retrograde planets are typically rather late bloomers in this very field that is indicated by the retrograde motion planet. Things may also happen or yield great success later in life when people have achieved grand maturity, possibly on extremely high levels. And here we say that because of the 10,000 hours, you've done things for such a long time that you're just sheer great at it. This happens especially when the retrograde planet is the ruler of birth. The ruler of birth is the planet that rules the rising sign. Many things may seem like a repetition, like been there, done that. Like also as if it was a repetition from a previous life. Like people come here with this notion that they know their field already to an extent. It can also appear like a second chance to get it right, or as someone who's continuing a path from a previous life experience and therefore starting out at already higher levels than others would do who start in a field. Now let's go through the planets one by one. So Mercury in retrograde as a first one. Its properties in retrograde are that things are delayed or slower than usual. Then things will feel like a déjà vu. And what we also see a lot is that people with a retrograde Mercury would rather answer questions also and then explain without being asked. So they don't force their opinion on you. They would also revise several times when they write up something or write an email. They just read through it and then like consider it differently, and then the text ends up totally different than it started out. Mercury retrograde phases are, by the way, not ideal to start projects because of the many delays that may occur. So people who start projects in retrograde typically complain that things are very dragged out and late and seem like repetitive and cumbersome. So if you can wait for Mercury prograde phase where Mercury is in full speed, then would advise you to wait for the phase to pass and then still add a few days for Mercury to pick up speed in the prograde motion. Venus in retrograde. Their love is the dominant theme, and it's all about to love and to be loved. That is very important to these individuals. They seek confirmation and have a strong radiance. Sometimes they also realize late or too late how much they loved someone. They may be unrealistic or overly romantic when it comes to expectations in love. Their relationships may appear like a karmic repetition, good or bad. And sometimes they do settle late or later than others. Then Mars in retrograde. Mars retrograde people are interested in the causes and reasons of things that happen. They investigate a lot how things came into being. The root causes are interesting to them. And they question and revise decisions quite more often than others. They also question male qualities or try to demonstrate them as a compensation. This can turn out very well and very refined as a result, or come across like posing or pushy, right? Also depends a bit on the cultural background and societal expectations. Like if you're not so very sure about what you would need to project as a man and try to put it together for yourself to create the image of a man that you think is good, then this is sometimes heavily influenced by society, and these people take a while to. Sometimes Mars retrograde people tend to exert more pressure than necessary in discussions, for instance, and so they may run into open doors and not notice. Jupiter in retrograde. The retrograde properties of Jupiter are that these people have a stunning intuition to telling true from false. They've also lots of deja vu moments, and they appear really wise and sage-like. They may also have issues with religion and ethics or diversity and fairness. In a negative expression, they may be overly critical and arrogant or full of prejudice toward others, and interestingly enough, others also toward them. In a positive form, they are wise advisors, philosophers, and psychics. Sometimes all this in one person. Retrograde Saturn makes rather introvert people with a tendency to retreat or isolate. They feel under pressure, tend to overwork or work harder than necessary. They have a strong sense of unfairness and tend to feel treated unfairly quickly. Sometimes they have spectacular bad luck that could be avoided, and some of the natives do avoid that very well because they have the sense of when this happens. But also sometimes the natives refuse to do something against it because they feel they are doomed anyway. So here's a great chance to take your destiny into your own hands, because here it mostly depends on your approach, and the approach may be learned or may remembered from a previous life. So like, I'm doomed anyway may just be a belief and no more than that. And just because we believe, then it is so. So here is the cornerstone to really decide to drop these types of beliefs. Sometimes they feel they need to prove something, and so they're very hard on themselves and sometimes also on others. There can be strong emotional battles going on here, also with regards to authority and authority figures. Sometimes they have an emotionally reduced childhood or upbringing. Then we come to Uranus in retrograde. These people were maybe astrologers in a previous life. So they're very interested in also the ancestral memory and historical reasons of current events, and also previous life experience. And you will find people with a strong talent and interest for astrological interpretation. The retrograde Neptune will give you a sense to identify fake prophets and fake preachers. A lot of mystics have a retrograde Neptune, and basically they are here as like a sobering force in terms of mystic knowledge. They are but also their own best critic in this field. Their goal is clearly mystical purity and honesty. The retrograde Pluto is very interesting. Gives you a natural feeling for power, like good sense of the application of power, that you act out yourself and that others employ, right? These people naturally radiate power, and have power, and they are very aware of it. Typically, they are very conscious about power, and they keep also refining the ways how they radiate and enact power. All right. Please put your questions also, if there are any, in the comments below. We'll try to answer them all, of course. All right, that was it for today, and we hope you find useful content in this video and on this channel. We appreciate your feedback. Thanks for your comments. Please also comment what interests you. We will try to cater to the most requested themes first. Please also subscribe to stay updated with free content every Sunday. And please remember to activate the notifications to be informed about new content. Thank you for your interest, and see you again soon on this channel.